Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's UCLA Alumni Town Hall featuring Bruins in Elected Office, a virtual fireside chat with UCLA alumni serving in elected office. This moderated discussion will highlight each elected official's path to office and the importance of public service. We're excited to share that today's guests include Shirley Weber, California Secretary of State, and Monica Sanchez, Pico Rivera City Council member. You can find their full bio on the event page. For some general webinar housekeeping, we will have time for Q&A with our speakers toward the end of the program. Please email your questions to the email that will appear in the chat. We will also be recording the event and we will send it out once it is made available. To start the program, I would like to introduce myself. I am Cinthia Flores, a board member of the UCLA Alumni Association and chair of the Civic Engagement Committee. Before diving into the conversation with our distinguished guests, I want to thank the UCLA Government and Community Relations Office and Team Alumni for their incredible work and support in making today's program possible. I also want to thank the offices of Secretary Weber and Councilmember Sanchez for the support in coordinating this program. All righty, let's get to it. Secretary Weber and Councilmember Sanchez, if you could please come on camera at this time. And it is so lovely to see the both of you. Thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us this lovely afternoon. To start off, I'd like to ask each of you to tell us a bit about your current role. What does your typical day consist of? So where do you conduct your work? What does your work entail? Travel, legislating, governing. We were chatting prior to the webinar. I know that there might be a little bit of travel that's even going on today. Let's start with Secretary Weber.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be with you. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things that I do as a part of my job as the Secretary of State. Everything you listed was exactly what I do almost every day. I travel a lot because my jurisdiction is the state of California. So not only do I have an office in LA, I have an office also in Sacramento, and potentially will have an office eventually in San Diego. So I have, I'm up and down the state. The main office is in Sacramento at the Secretary of State's major building, and we have approximately 500 to 600 employees at any one time in that particular facility. And I deal not only with elections, I deal with all the businesses in California, the registration of all the businesses. We run webinars and seminars for them. We deal with all elections. I'm the official election officer of the state of California. So every jurisdiction, every ROV is under our jurisdiction. And so we handle all of the state, the federal elections in California. We also handle all of California's archives. The history of California is in the Secretary of State's building. So the archives are housed in a section of our building, and our responsibility is to take care of all of the archives and the information that's there, and we run seminars and workshops on those things as well. Everything that deals with elections, the public records of the elected officials and the filings and the documents and the money that they spend, all of that is in my office. So it's quite an extensive office that requires travel, requires lecturing, seminars across and activity across the nation, not only up and down the state, but also across the nation and occasionally international.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes, thank you. My work primarily takes place locally in my city in Pico Rivera. Although my office is at City Hall on Passons Boulevard in Pico Rivera, that's primarily not where I would say a lot of our business takes place. Our meetings are in the council chambers twice a month, the second and last Tuesday of every month. And our meetings are a couple hours long, Tuesday evenings. But other than that, I'm primarily in the city attending events. We have a lot of ribbon cutting events, groundbreaking events, meeting with residents and constituents. In addition, we travel. I am actually in Sacramento right now. I'm at the Sacramento airport, so you might hear a little bit of background noise. We are attending a legislative conference And part of the work that we do is through California contract cities. Pico Rivera is a very small city, not very small, I would say small to medium size. And we are a contract city. We hire LA County sheriffs. We don't have our own police department. We have LA County Fire. We contract with other vendors and county entities to help us with our city services. So part of the work that I do is to advocate for my city, being a small to medium city. We're primarily a Latino community, working class community. And so I'm here in Sacramento advocating for local control, a lot of local support that we get from the state in order to support our smaller city.
Fantastic. Hard at work. It sounds like both of you all have quite the job. I'm curious, what made you want to pursue a career in public service? Let's start with Councilmember Sanchez.
Of course. I think for me, at my time, there were no other women on the city council, and I was feeling a lack of representation on decisions that were being made in my city. I'm a mother, I have 2 sons, and I wanted to get involved and have a say in my city. Particularly how I got involved was I was passionate about improving our parks in my city. And at the time we had a lot of graffiti on our slides and in our parks. And I would often call City Hall and complain to the mayor that I wanted to see this graffiti cleaned up really quickly, because I would take my sons to the park all the time. And I ended up getting appointed as a commissioner on the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I would advocate for park space, and I still do, but that's something that got me involved, being at the parks with my sons all the time. And so that's how I became involved in city and local government.
Wonderful. Secretary Weber.
You know, it's been a journey, quite a long journey with me in terms of public engagement and public service. I don't know if I ever really thought that I'd go into quote unquote public service in terms of elected positions, but I think that what happens is that pretty much like Monica mentioned, that you get engaged because there are problems that need to be solved, and you want to solve those problems. And so I've been one of those persons as a problem solver for many, many years. My real career and passion obviously is education. I spent 40 years as a professor at San Diego State University. And that in itself was a thrust into public service, because I was developing the Africana Studies department, and which meant there was lots of politics, lots of engagement that was beyond just teaching in the classroom. You know, so we had to galvanize and organize communities and faculty and students and on and on and on. And so I became a kind of a public figure as a result of my advocacy for education and equity and social justice issues at San Diego State University. That then pushed me into the school board, which then pushed me into the assembly by people asking me to run for these offices. And I kept trying to find somebody else and never did. And then when the Secretary of State's position became vacant, it was at that level that, once again, I had no idea that I'd be Secretary of State. It was not, I had expected by now to probably be retiring from the assembly, and got a call from the governor to become Secretary of State as a result of advocacy and as a result of friends and persons pushing the governor to find a Secretary of State that they thought would represent them well. While others were applying, I didn't apply. And as a result, got chosen and has run and now serves a full term as Secretary of State. So, you know, but I think we all get into these, some actually dream of becoming an elected official. The others of us dream of having a better world. And I think as a result of that better world, we look around and we try to find somebody to take on that task and realize that we're looking in the mirror, and that's going to be the person who's going to really take the task. And so we somehow or another succumb to the reality that we're an elected official.
Well, I gotta say, hearing you both speak about your journeys is truly inspiring. And now you've both mentioned this. Each of you has served in the public in one or more capacities, right? Secretary Weber, you mentioned your service with the State Assembly and the San Diego Unified School District. And Councilmember Sanchez, you mentioned your role as a Parks and Recreation Commissioner. You've also served as a Planning Commissioner and Mayor of the city of Pico Rivera. I'm curious to hear a bit more maybe about how your previous experiences informed and prepare you for your current role. If we could go back to Secretary Weber.
Well, one of the, and I think that's extremely important because so often people think that when you accomplish things and you do things, or they'll see the legislation that I did as an assembly member and they'll say, how did you get that? How did you do that? You learn a lot about working with individuals and others to make change. And one of the things that has helped me, obviously, as an advocate for education and being out there, not in an elected capacity, but just as a professor and a community activist, you learn how to work with people. You learn something about them. You learn something about their needs, your needs. And as a result, it makes you a better legislator when you start collaborating and you start working with individuals. And the fact that I'd spent 40 years at the university and part of that on the school board, I had to learn to work with everyone at that university in order to accomplish and establish a department that is still alive today after 50 years, that is still a strong department. You had to learn to work with people. You had to learn how to collaborate together. You had to learn how to form partnerships. And all of those things, I think, work together if you pay attention to what you're doing, that when you get into a position like the legislature or you get on the school board. I was one of the only African-American on the school board, the only Black person, and the only person of color, period, on the school board. And yet I seldom lost a vote. Because I appealed to everyone that was there about what we were doing and what was taking place. And oftentimes there were some critical issues of resources and those kinds of things, but it was because I understood them. I had worked through these issues at the university with administrators, with colleagues, with others. And I think those years of doing that made me able to learn how to collaborate, how to work together, and have served me well in those positions, but also now serves me well as Secretary of State to be able to work with all of the registrar voters in California, as well as a large staff that's in my office, that we have people who love to come to work because of the way we administer the office that I learned when I was at the university, working at the university and having to build a team and a family of people who work together.
Wonderful. And thank you for sharing how your previous experiences have really helped you and informed you and prepared you for your current role. Councilmember Sanchez, how have your previous experiences helped you and prepared you to serve in your current role?
So yes, as Dr. Weber mentioned, my political career is technically my second job. My first job is I work for the LA County Office of Education, and I received my doctorate degree in my bachelor's in psychology from UC Berkeley, from Cal, with Cal Bear first. And then I'm a double Bruin, of course. I got my master's and my doctorate in education with an emphasis in ethnic studies. And I'm the director of grants development, where my role is applying for grants and getting resources for the schools within our county office of education in our system. So I think in that role, in working for the Office of Education, that's what I do as a council member, is I find any resource possible and try to bring that to our community. And that's what I'm doing as well here in Sacramento, looking for grants, looking for resources, looking for money to support my community. And I think that background has really helped me. My writing skills, definitely, that I learned from UCLA and Berkeley, as well as communication skills and not being afraid to speak up and also meet with people from diverse backgrounds. And I think one key note that Dr. Weber brought up was building a team. Along the way, we've come across numerous people, and we crossed paths so many times. There are senators now that were students, and they were student officials when I was a student at UCLA and at Berkeley. So we've kind of grown up together in the UC system and then end up here in Sacramento together in some type of capacity. So I think just learning how to build a team as a student learning how to work together when sometimes you don't even see eye to eye, but you have to compromise, communicate, and also just find a collective to work together and learn how to accomplish a goal together.
Incredible. It's clear that the two of you are passionate about public service. And with that being said, can you share the most fulfilling aspect of your career in public service, and also any challenges you've encountered in your roles? And I'm going to go back to Secretary Weber.
Well, I think I've always found that probably the most fulfilling aspect of service is when you can empower those around you to believe they can do things. Oftentimes we represent communities that have been disenfranchised, have not been able to get resources that they need or the respect that they need. And then all of a sudden you become the elected official and you hear them, you do things with them, and then they begin to realize that they can accomplish these things, that there's power in these positions where others have maybe taken advantage of them, did not pay attention to them, but thought that because they were poor that they could not do things. And all of a sudden you come along and you open this door of social justice or resources, or you bring in money to schools and you do things. It changes people's perception of not just of you, but of who they are. And I have found great joy in empowering individuals, whether it's a student being able to graduate from the university when I was teaching and they didn't think they could ever do it, and you open up ways for them to do it, and then they realize that this is something they can do, or it's an elected official, or your constituents who all of a sudden realize that they've been banging on this door forever and couldn't open it, and all of a sudden they figure out ways in which they can through some level of collaboration, and then there's success. And that empowers communities time and time again, that they can continue to come back and get it done. So for me, that's been the most important thing that I find rewarding. Probably the most disappointing thing I could say is, in terms of things that happen, is that things take too long. And your patience gets weak. But I always have to go back to the fact that we're still making progress, even though I know that we need to be much further along than we are. We need to have more resources for our kids or whatever it may be. But I'm still encouraged because I see those folks who we have made some steps along the way that they never thought they could make. And as a result, that still gives me courage and gives me some kind of solace in the fact that we can continue to make progress. But I'm impatient because I feel like we keep going forward and back, and that in itself to me is frustrating, and even in the capacity that I'm in, dealing with elections and how far we've come in terms of elections for everyone, and now we've got all this other stuff, and now everything is tense, but we have to continue to go back to realize how far we've come, but also how far we still have to go. So that sometimes frustrates me when I think that we're not as far as we should be.
Well, I can definitely relate. I have to constantly remind myself, progress over perfection, progress over perfection. We're going to get there. How about you, Councilmember Sanchez? What would you share as the greatest kind of reward, and then maybe some of the challenges of the job?
Sure. One highlight that I can think of was about a year ago, I was able to serve as mayor. In my city, we don't have an elected mayorship. We have 5 elected council members. And then from the 5 of us, each council member gets to elect one person to serve as mayor for the year. And myself, I'm the only woman, the only Latina, also the youngest council member. They appointed me or elected me to serve as mayor for the year. And one of the projects that in events that I got to hold was a girls' conference for high school girls. And we had over 200 high school students from my city that came. We had it was just coming out of COVID and the pandemic, and we had a session on mental health practices and how to cope with that. We had self-defense. We had our sheriff captain is also a woman. So we were really excited to have all-female self-defense group out of our LA County Sheriff's Department. We had a session on education with our superintendent. She was also, Dr. Esparza was also a woman at the time. And so it was a time of really girl power, I felt, in my city. And I felt proud that we were also empowering other high school girls to get involved. We also appointed a student representative on our Parks and Recreation Commission. And we have a female veteran, our Veterans Commission. We have women on our Planning Commission. We have women on our Parks and Rec Commission. Although I'm still, that's the frustrating part, I'm still the only councilwoman, and 4 years has gone by. I will be up for re-election next year. And so I think I agree with Dr. Weber. The frustrating part is, even though you try so hard, 4 years goes by and I feel that I haven't accomplished what I set out to. And so things take time, and I think we have made progress. But the frustrating part is sometimes we digress and we go back in one area, and then sometimes we move forward in another, and it takes time to progress. But I think we shouldn't be so tough on ourselves, like you said. Like, if you make a positive change, you can't judge the end factor of what you hoped to accomplish. But I think we have seen progress in my city.
Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing. We're so proud to have you both represent Bruins in elected office. On that note, and Council Member Sanchez, you spoke about this, the role that your UCLA experience, both in and outside of the classroom, had in shaping your decision to pursue a career in public service. And so what role, if any, did your UCLA experience play, whether that's, again, major professional degrees, maybe even involvement on campus, et cetera? So I'll go ahead and I'll start with Council Member Sanchez on this one.
Sure. When I was at UCLA, I had run for initially Vice President of External Affairs, or Vice President of Internal Affairs. And I lost my election. I was on a slate with other Latina women. All of us lost except one, Cindy Mosqueda, if she's watching, I hope she is. She was the only one that won. However, I was disappointed. I was new to the process, and I actually only ran because a friend of mine was in the law school and had encouraged me to run. And so I was in the ed school at the time, and there were a group of us from different schools that had decided to run. And so that was really an experience, an eye-opening experience. However, I was able to speak to the president that had won at the time. He was from the engineering school, and he did like my ideas, and he appointed me to become the director of Community Service Commission. So I served as the director of Community Service Commission when I was at UCLA. Then in the next year, I ran for vice president of External Affairs, and I won. And then after that, I ran for GSA president, Graduate Student Association president, and I won. So I served in different roles as a graduate student in leadership roles at UCLA. And again, it was being one of the only Latinas. I think my picture may still be up in Kirkhoff Hall on the 3rd floor, and that makes me proud to look up there. And there are very few Latina GSA presidents on that wall, but I hope that in the future there are more, and the Latinas come up and look at those pictures, and hopefully they aspire to run someday and have the courage to. And even if you lose the first time around, don't give up and take another position. Maybe that position wasn't yours, and when one door closes, maybe it's going to lead you to another one that leads you to another path.
Excellent. Secretary Weber?
I was at UCLA in a very unique time, long time ago. It constantly reminds me, I'm almost had my doctorate now for 50 years. And so it was a time when there were only 300 African Americans in the entire campus. That was graduate and undergraduate students. And it was right before EOP. EOP came in, I think my first semester, whatever it was. So there were not a lot of opportunities and not a lot of attention. And I don't even think the campus knew what to do with Black students at that time. There was very little, the Black student unions hadn't been formed yet. So we lost a lot of students. In fact, every student who came in with me eventually dropped out of UCLA and eventually went home or went to someplace else, or eventually went back to one of the campuses somewhere else. So it was interesting that it was an interesting time. And so what I saw more than anything at UCLA as a student coming out of South Central LA, living in the dorm and those kinds of things, I saw the tremendous disparity that existed between the campus and Westwood and South Central LA. And I realized at that moment the tremendous opportunity I had been given to basically do some things that others had never envisioned who lived on my block, to not only go to UCLA, but to visualize themselves in a better position than they had been. And I really became more inspired, not so much to, in that sense of being leadership at UCLA, but eventually came back to my community in my junior year. I was still a student, to live at home and to take the kids in my community to UCLA periodically, to the library, to try to expose them to things. I started working at the Malcolm X Center that was just a few blocks from my house and dealing with issues of mental health and what have you. So I then began to realize the unique, not only opportunity I had, but the responsibility I had, and why people at my church and my neighborhood were so excited that I was going to UCLA, even though they had never been there themselves. And so I then realized that I had this unique responsibility to do what I could to change the essence of my community and the world in which I existed. And I really became an activist in a real weird sense, and not in the radical sense of the 60s that were there. A lot of my friends did, but I became quite an activist about education, about helping kids, helping my community, my neighbors, people who needed things. If there was an obituary that had to be written, I wrote all the obituaries because they didn't have the literacy skills to do that. And so I then committed myself not only to do that, but to always live in a community of challenge. And I've never lived outside of quote unquote the ghetto. I've never and my husband was a lawyer and a judge, and we've had these resources, but I've never lived away from people of need and poverty, because I felt my presence made a difference. And I think that's how I became the activist at a school. When my kids' school things were going on, I was the one who had the education. I was the one who had the training and the background. The other parents did not, but my kids were in that school with them. And so I felt like, well, if my kids are in this school, it's going to be a great school, because I'm going to help make it a great school. And so I then took that as what I do, and my house was built in the community. I live in this place of poverty and need, and at the same time, opportunity and see greatness. And so I took that experience of seeing such disparity between Westwood and all the beautiful homes and what people talked about in those days versus what my community that was in the same city, but 20 miles, 30 miles away in South Central LA, who never had even seen this place before. And I had never seen it before I got there, okay? So I took that as an opportunity to say, you've been given this really unique experience, and you should take this and open this door for others to see. And that's what I end up doing I've done my entire life.
Well, I so appreciate both of you all responding to the question. I'm also an LA native, and I gotta say, UCLA has been such a special place for me. And I can definitely relate to that sense of responsibility and bringing the resources and the experiences on campus, outside the campus. And really, there's really one thing left to say: go Bruins. Fantastic. So I want to bring the focus a bit to this year, which promises to be a big one in the electoral politics world. As we approach the 2024 election cycle, how do you think voter education efforts promote and support civic engagement? And why do you think it is important for people to vote? And I'll start with Secretary Weber on this one.
It is extremely important for us to recognize the power of voting. And one of the things in my life was my parents were sharecroppers who came to California and never had a chance to vote in Arkansas. In fact, my father came here because the Klan was after him. And as when they came to California, they registered to vote and they voted in every election. And in fact, in South Central, my house, where we lived, was a polling place. My mother opened up our house to basically for people to come and vote. It is so important when you understand why people don't vote, but equally important when they're those who can't vote. And we're in a critical period now that I thought we would never be in as Secretary of State, where we have folks challenging people's rights to vote and trying to take the vote away from them. That in itself is a critical issue that we have to address and that we have to continue to fight to make sure that everyone has a chance to vote in California and across the nation, and that we're educated about it. So we have spent a tremendous amount of time working with communities that have never had the Secretary of State to ever come there before, and Calexico and other places, to basically open up the opportunity for people to register to vote and to understand their power. You know, we're registering high school students, pre-registering them, because we're teaching them, you know, you have one vote, you have tremendous power. You have as much power as your parents have because you have the right to vote. They get one vote, you get one vote. So we have been working with all of the communities to educate them about the importance of voting. And those of us in elected positions know what happens on boards and commissions and things when our communities don't show up, they don't vote. We have people on city council, school boards, and other communities get things, and we don't get them because our folks don't somehow or another come forward to vote and to make their voices heard. So it is extremely important in my office that we educate people about voting, that we work with our young people, we work with those older ones, and we're going to do a thing hopefully this summer called Freedom Summer, which is based on 1964's Freedom Summer. And we're going to do it this time because it's 60 years after Freedom Summer, to really help people understand why people like Fannie Lou Hamer and Medgar Evers and others gave their lives and their time in order to get people to vote. What that power means, not just that you got the opportunity to do it, but you have the responsibility to do it, and you can change the world. So we're working hard to make sure that folks understand not where to vote and how often you vote, but why you should vote. Why you should vote and the power that's involved in that. So it is extremely important, and it's one of the, like I always tell people, it's interesting to me because my grandfather never got a chance to vote because he died before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so it's ironic that his granddaughter now is responsible for 40 million Californians to vote, and he never got a chance to vote. And we're going to take advantage of that opportunity and make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. Councilmember Sanchez?
Yes, I think there is, there is that historic distrust among like our communities. My community is primarily Mexican, Latino, Central American, and my dad is from Mexico. My dad's not he's a permanent resident. He's not a citizen, and he's never had the opportunity to vote. My mom and we vote, my sister. However, I think within our communities, there's kind of a distrust of the government, and that's why they don't register. They don't sign up for anything. We have some census areas that are very, very low reporting. And so that's some of the work that we do at the local level, is try to get people to register to vote. And even when I was a student, that was one of our large campaigns, was voter registration and education. And one thing that I've been told is people don't know council members. And when they meet me, they're like, oh, wow, you're just a normal person. And you're not that corrupt politician that we read about in the newspaper. And so I try my best to be personable and share with them my story about, I'm just a mom, number one. I never aspired to be a mayor or any political world. And I consider myself a public servant. We don't get a salary, we get a stipend. That's why I have to work a full-time job in addition to the work that I do in the evening. And so I try to educate them that, my goal is not to be getting a lot of money. We don't get rich by this. And our goal is to educate them about opportunities, town halls, to share information about our projects. and that they too have a voice. Even if they don't have a vote, they can come to public comment, they can send email. And I think now that you can vote by mail, that's been really big, and that I believe it was in 2020 that was first initiated, that voting by mail really helped our city to get people to turn in their ballots and do it by mail. But I think we still have to address, the historic past of what happened, and why we have that distrust in our communities, and try our best to reassure, and as well as to find ways to make sure that our residents are secure, their information is secure, they're not lied to, or their information is not used in a way that's going to hurt them. So I think just creating the face of what local government could look like, that's something that I try to do. Is I'm the mom, I'm the tia, I'm the one that will talk to them, and now they call me when they need graffiti removed or lights at the park are out. And so I tried to do that when I didn't have that, when I was just not part of the political system.
Thank you both. And before we get to Q&A, which we will shortly after this question, generally, do you have any advice for those interested in a career in public service? And I'll start with Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes, my advice I would give is to get involved. I know sometimes you already think, how can you do it? You're strapped for time if you're a mom and you're rushing to go to work and rushing to pick up the kids and rushing to make dinner and do laundry and all of these chores. Find a way to get involved in something that you're passionate about, either at the school district, at the park, somewhere where you're already at, where your kids are already at, and find that piece that you're passionate about. My meetings are usually in the evening when I'm free, and my job is, during regular business hours. So the thing that really helped me too was Zoom. Zoom meetings have helped me expand my capacity. So get involved and see what roles are available. A lot of times there are a vacancy for Planning Commission, Veterans Commission, Parks and Recreation. Cities have a number of commissions and boards. They're looking for women and any volunteer to come and serve on. And then it helps you to get to know the people in the city, as well as the issues that are going on in the city. And so I think also even just helping a candidate, helping an individual with their campaign. I appreciate any help that I had students and mothers and people help me when it was time for me to campaign. And so that was a big help to me.
Thank you, Secretary Weber.
Yes, I totally agree with our councilwoman with regards to what needs to happen. I don't necessarily encourage everybody to run for office, because it's not for them. And a lot of folks don't want to be out there standing on the stump making speeches and that level of commitment. But all of us can do something. And I encourage people to do something in the community where they live, because those of us in office know that, whatever resources we have will only go so far. And the difference is made when people take those resources and turn them into things that are really exciting and can bring new life to projects and things that are just done at the city or the county or even at the state level. I encourage people to do something. Whatever it is, whatever you think you would like to see better. When people tell me things that they want done, I say, okay, well, when will we start? That's you. And when will we start? Because that then engages people in their community. It makes their community better. They enter the community and the world that they live with completely different eyes, fresh eyes, to see the problem that they face and understand all the challenges there, but then find the solutions to them. So I tell folks, whatever you want to do, start local. The best statewide or elected officials that I've ever seen have been those that have started local, that decided that did some work at the beginning and got a chance to meet people and know people and put faces on problems. And as a result of that, they make much better elected officials statewide or even just in their county or their assembly district than someone who decides, I'm just going to run for office, and they run. And they don't really know the neighborhoods. They don't know the folks that are there. They don't really have a grasp, nor do they have the passion to make change. And so I encourage people to do something, that all of us need folks to help us in our office, to volunteer on a campaign. But you also can just decide that you're going to work at Park and Rec. There's so many kids in our systems that need adults who are responsible to help them with the challenges they face. And most of the time when you hear a kid who's turned his or her life around, it's because there was some adult who happened to be there that took some interest in them and made a difference. So I encourage folks to really get involved, to get engaged, and to make a difference where you are. Don't start saying you're going to save the world. Save the person next door first, and then you'll eventually get to the world.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that excellent insight. I'm going to turn over. We have just a few minutes for questions. One of the questions that we received was, for citizens in your city and state who would like to get involved in forming or promoting legislation, what recommendations might you have to find good connections beyond the offices of the council members and state legislators directly?
I assume that's probably me. Are they talking about legislation in terms of the Assembly and the Senate? You should definitely, first of all, see if your elected official has, because they have the people and the staff to actually write the legislation and to try to get it done. But also, there are a lot of advocacy groups that are in areas that you may have an interest. If you're interested in motivating schools or getting money for Park and Rec, look at the advocacy groups that are there already, that are working hard, and become a part of them. You discover that when you do legislation, especially difficult legislation, like some of the things I've done dealing with lethal force and all those other things that I did. There are hordes of organizations, the ACLU, the various organizations that exist in your communities and your NAACPs, your Urban League, your MECHA. All of these groups basically are advocacy groups also. So when you go with them, you then become a part of a large network. And it helps you in writing the legislation to get those folks together, and they then really drive the legislation. When people have talked to me about stuff I've done in the Assembly, and I always tell them, I got these things done because I had an army. I had an army of people who were communities everywhere where they were being pulled together. Dolores Huerta was there, and this was there, and that was there. And all these folks focused on this legislation so that you go there with an army and you become a part of that army. So I tell folks, look for those advocacy groups in your community that are trying to make a difference, and volunteer with those individuals. And you'd be surprised how they will pick up your ideas, your legislation, and move forward. But never discount your elected officials, your assembly member, your senator that's representing your district. It's their job to also take legislation for you. And most of us will have someone like, helping to write laws and have competitions also among our members, our constituents, to say there ought to be a law. It's one of the things that most legislators have. And you can put together legislation. And I've taken legislation from my community and actually got it passed and put into law. And that is exciting for communities to know that they had a small group of community concerned individuals were able to network and to get things done. But there are lots of advocacy groups out there looking for you and looking for your time and your energy to help.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez, do you care to add to that response?
Yes, I agree. And I think in my city, you can even start at the local level, because oftentimes the individual doesn't know there are certain jurisdictions. So my city, they might have an idea for state law, or that applies as a federal law. However, there may be something that we can do at the local level. So for instance, at the time when I was mayor, I was approached regarding banning flavored tobacco products in my city, banning the sale of flavored tobacco products, and it was pending legislation at the state level, hadn't been passed. But at my local level, I was able to make an ordinance in my city and ban the sale of all flavored tobacco products, because at the time that was being marketed to youth, and that was my goal as mayor to protect our children from having access to tobacco or being advertised even with enticed with those types of products. So there are different jurisdictions that you can do depending on where we are. Your ideas might be related to gun control, anything federal. You can go to your congressperson, congress member. State is assembly or senator, and then the city, we're at the local level. You can start there. I think I'm the place usually that I have these conversations with residents, and just think outside of the box of sometimes we can feel powerless in especially considering this legislation, but there are a lot of experts out there that help to troubleshoot and write the legislation. So I think start locally and ask questions.
Wonderful. We also had a question, just how can we strengthen the voting process in California? And including, I'm going to just couple this as a kind of subsidiary of that question is thoughts on online voting. Is this something that California could or would consider?
Well, California has probably the most open voting system in the nation. When you think about everyone gets a ballot. Everyone in California who's a citizen can vote. The only person who can is those who are physically sitting in a state or federal prison. If you're in a county jail, a city jail, if you've been in prison and you're out now, everyone and all these folks can vote in California. So we have a very open voting system that allows others to do that. We have a vote count system statewide that you can, in many of your jurisdictions, you can basically vote anywhere in the county. We have voting boxes everywhere. We have in many areas, 11 days to vote. So when it goes to California, there's all the excuses that people have given us in the past about voting. We don't really have those there. The online voting is far, far away because of the fact that they cannot secure online voting. I was in a meeting recently with some folks and those who run all the cable folks, and I said, when can you ensure me that I won't be treated just like I'm treated with my credit card on a regular basis, where I have to change my numbers and change this and change that because somebody's breaking into all your systems. And they could not say when they could. I mean, because of the fact that it's so fragile. And then in this environment that we're in now, where everybody thinks everything's a fraud and everything's this and everything's that, it really isn't a good time to even talk about it. Those who talk about it, used to talk about it, don't talk about it anymore because it's hard to secure online anything. And so as a result, but we have everything else that's open. We have special voting with those who are disabled and various systems that they can use and what have you. But online voting at this point, you don't hear a lot of talk about it anymore like they used to, because we have not been able to, with all of our technology, to secure online activity. And as a result, we have everything else. And in that sense, we have opened it up so that people don't have excuses about can't get there, got to go to work, can't this, can't that. We've got all of those things opened up, and people are not confused. If you're walking the streets of Los Angeles and you're a citizen, you're eligible to vote. There is no past discussion of felony convictions or any of those things that we used to have before. So unless you're physically sitting in a state or federal prison for a felony, you cannot vote. But once you've done your time, you're free. You can vote in California.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez, care to add?
Yes, I still have hope. That's not my skill set, but I believe there is some technology guru out there that's going to find a way. And, there are some geniuses out there, possibly at Cal, UCLA, San Diego. And, technology changes every year. I still have hope. And, if someone is listening right now, you're a computer engineer, technology expert, let's think of a way to do it and think outside the box. And that's how we can do it in California.
Well, thank you both. That's all the time we have for today. I want to, again, take this opportunity to thank Secretary Weber and Councilmember Sanchez for your long service to the community and a dynamic conversation I know I'm walking away from this conversation feeling inspired, renewed, ready for the new year. Again, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you at the next one. Happy New Year, everyone.
Same to you. Thank you.